Well, hey, glad to be with you. This is Dallas at the Harmonized Brain Centers, and I have Steve McAllister with us, and we're just going to have a little conversation. And something that's near and dear to my heart is how do people really deal with being on the spectrum? How do you overcome being just a person, and but also getting the labels that get associated with it? So let me just kind of ask you. I know that you've written some books. Well, let me, before we even get into that, why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Stephen McAllister, and I have Asperger's syndrome, which is one of the various forms of autism. And basically, to put it simply, it just means that my brain's wired differently, and while I possess certain skills like attention to detail and good memory, I also struggle with certain social aspects like eye contact. So if you see my eyes wandering around, that's kind of the reason why. There's also body language, social cues, all that stuff that neurotypicals often take for granted on a day-to-day basis or may not even think about. So originally, when I was growing up, I wanted to learn more about how autism affected my life when I learned about it at the age of 5. My mom always described it as a special gift, so that had a huge influence on how I see autism in the world. Like, I know some people don't really have like a positive view or insight of autism, but I believe that what my mom said to me at an early age was what really set in stone my thoughts about autism. So now that I've learned a lot about how it affects my life and how other people view me, I want to educate other people about it. So to do this, I created two books. So I'm an author. The first one is Traces an Autistic Pathway to Creative Expression, where it talks about autism and daydreaming through an illustration to show that just because autistics daydream or pace around or maybe stare off into space doesn't necessarily mean that they're cut off from the rest of the world. If anything, it's kind of like their brainstorming process or how they adapt to a situation. I'm not sure how many of you remember a Nickelodeon show known as Doug. And basically, what happens with Doug is whenever he gets in a stressful situation or something he's really looking forward to, he kind of daydreams this over the top situation where things get a little bit crazy. And no, I'm not saying Doug is autistic, I'm just using him as an example.
Yeah.
The other one I wrote was On the Trail with Annie and Angel, and it's a short story illustrating a mother and her autistic child, showing how two people can walk the same path but not necessarily see eye to eye. And it doesn't just have to be with like parents with autistic children. It could be parents and children in general, showing that yeah, we may see the same thing but not come to the same conclusion per se. So far the books have been doing good. The first one sold over 100 copies, and second one's doing pretty good also. And a few years ago, I started the YouTube channel called Tostemac, where on Saturday mornings I post various subjects about autism, but also what else is going on with my life, like my first time going to a metal concert, how I dealt with all the noise and certain fears that I have going to a concert. And some of the recent autism videos I talked about was like autism and the police, like how policemen can better handle those situations, and also whether or not there should be security cameras in classrooms because that's a big issue in recent years. And the other one is how to deal with bullying, like how to put a stop to it.
Right. How to
So
do that? Okay. So on a YouTube, so you do a podcast or something every Saturday, or pretty much every Saturday?
it's actually in the form of a autism vlog. Like
Hmm.
usually early on in the week, I will record and then like edit the audio, edit the videos, so that way it looks like not only something educational but also eye-catching and entertaining.
Right.
Because the way that content creators set themselves apart from others is not just the information they give, but also how they give the information. It's about presentation. So I had to make it so it's like it's educational, but it's also eye catching. So that way it's not like an
Right.
hour long documentary where people just
Just
fall
like
asleep.
go to sleep. Yeah.
Exactly.
We've all seen those, and we've
And
all done that.
in terms of like podcasts, I thought about doing that maybe in the distant future. I just
Okay.
gotta figure out how exactly it would work. If it would be like pre recorded or maybe streamed on Facebook or something like that. So I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, okay. So going back to, you were kind of diagnosed or at about age 5?
Well, I found out about age
5.
5. I was actually diagnosed much earlier. In fact, my mother, who's in the medical field, actually knew that something was up with me before the medical experts did. So
Right, okay. What was the hardest thing for you to overcome?
the hardest thing to overcome was the social skills. Like, as I mentioned earlier, it's a lot of stuff that neurotypicals take for granted, but it actually took me quite a long time to figure out. Like, something as simple as making a good joke or snapping a finger. That took me all the way until high school to figure that out, whereas most kids would just figure that out in elementary school. In terms of like body language, reading the room, and what's a true friend, I didn't figure that out until college and whatnot. But
When you say that, reading a room, is it just kind of picking up on the different personalities that are there,
Yeah,
or how
pretty
to
much,
interact, or is that what you're
yeah,
describing?
like, oh, I wanna maybe I could talk to this person, or maybe I should keep my distance from that one. Kind of read the atmosphere, and that was actually something I learned back when I was a freelance photographer with the Umbrella Syndicate. Being a freelance photographer was probably one of the best social experiences for me, because you go to different kinds of events while taking pictures. You get exposed to different kinds of environments, different kinds of traditions, mentalities, and social norms. You get to learn more about the environment that you live in. And when you get that kind of social exposure, you grow yourself as a person. In a sense, other people can serve like mirrors or reflections. Like, maybe you see some parts that you like about yourself. Maybe you see some parts that you don't like about yourself. And through seeing these reflections, you start to build who you are and what you want out of life, as well as being aware of how other people act and how other people see you.
Well, okay. Would you describe anybody that you've had as a mentor or somebody that you looked up to that helped you walk through this?
That's actually a good question. In terms of like the why I became an artist is like my dad and I would like back when I was a kid. My dad and I would read stories, watch TV shows, find stuff with good stories in them, and being pulled into a world that's much different than we take for granted. And I think that kind of set me on the path to being an artist. Now, in terms of like being like a video maker or like a photographer beforehand, there was a teacher back at Anne Arundel Community College in Maryland called Matthew Moore, who was like explained the whole creative process and like helping me brainstorm ideas, and that kind of set me on the path to how exactly I wanted to be an artist. And in terms of like social stuff, I'd say my mom was usually my best guidance. Like, if I did some good, she would let me know. If I did something bad, she would definitely let me know. So I had a lot of mentors throughout the years.
Okay. No, I mean, because life is a journey, life is a process, social skills, understanding that, and it is always difficult. Some people it just becomes a lot more natural, and other people on the spectrum, off the spectrum, I don't know that really, that is one of the traits, and it's just harder to learn to communicate on an emotional level.
Yeah, and it's one aspect that a lot of people tend to overlook. Like, it's not just the spectrum, it's not just the mental disorder, it's not just the autism, it's also the people surrounding the individual in question. Like, my mom always had a saying that it takes a community to raise someone with autism. And what she means by that is not because of how much help they need, because a lot of them don't need that much help,
Right.
but rather it's because of other people that we meet along the way that we become the people we are today. Like, maybe there was something you heard from a mentor or like maybe an elementary or middle school teacher that you probably didn't think is significant, but as like the years or decades go by, you realize, oh, wait a minute, they actually had a point. I should have listened.
I understand, yes. So, what is, let me ask you, I guess, one of the biggest fears you've had to overcome? I mean, just as a person.
Wow. One of the biggest fears. I guess my biggest fear was like, it's kind of a mix up between being a burden to other people or being like ridiculed, rejected, or even demonized as someone I'm not. The reason I had this fear of being a burden to other people was because as I was becoming aware of how I act and behave, I also became more aware of how my actions reflect or affect on other people. And when I see other people upset, I feel upset. And I really hate feeling like that. So I always had to work harder to make sure that I wasn't being a burden to anybody else. And
learning to become self-sufficient, not that you don't need other people at different times, but just feeling the confidence or gaining that confidence.
Exactly, so that it's not like people are constantly holding my hand every single time. I don't hold them back. So the other fear I had was like being like ridiculed or demonized. Actually came from one of the most important things I've learned, not only during like high school and college when they were talking about like plagiarism, but also in the working field. Integrity is a very important aspect, if not the most important aspect, because it tells people, hey, this person can be trusted, you can count on this person. So when someone messes with that integrity, it becomes a major issue, especially in the society we seem to live in these days where people are so quick to judge. It's like the guilty until proven innocent mentality. It's like, it's a huge deal where it's like, if this slander gets on your name, you gotta fix it right away. Otherwise, it's really gonna affect you big time down the road.
So I hear in what you're describing there is really owning who you are, the characteristics that you have. How did you avoid becoming a victim? Because it doesn't sound like you have a victim mentality. It's, hey, I might have an issue here or something I have to overcome, but let me try to figure out how to do that.
Oh, okay. So the way I avoided being a victim was, well, part of it had to do with tough love from Dad. Like, he didn't hold things back. He just called it as it is, just being blunt. The important thing of not being a victim, or two of the most important things, is one, having friends and family that support you and know that you have your back, because believing in yourself is good, but when other people believe in you, that's a special gift that can't be replaced. Now the other thing is to basically to believe in yourself and work to improve yourself, because as I said earlier, my fear of being a burden, of having people constantly hold my hand, I didn't want that. So I had to basically look inside myself and see, like, okay, what aspects are good? What aspects can I improve on? Or if I encounter a situation, like, okay, how do I deal with this? Maybe I can ask for help, because there were sometimes like I couldn't handle it on my own, or I worried that I might not make the right decision on my own, so I needed another person's input on the matter. And
Has that been difficult, learning to ask for help, or saying hey, or ask for somebody else's opinion?
more difficult than a lot of people would think, because this might have to do with me being stubborn and having a lot of pride of being able to do a lot of things on my own, or maybe it's just a dude thing. I don't know, but
I think it's a
like,
combination of all.
yeah, but we would like to think that we can basically do anything. Like, we don't need help, and sometimes when we ask for help, we feel like we're admitting that we can't do it, or we failed, or we messed up. So it's not necessarily easy to ask for help. Oftentimes we would like to think that things are under control, I can handle it myself, but when the reality of the situation is I can't, you have to be able to acknowledge that and be able to ask for help, because if you try to handle everything on your own, you're most likely going to stumble somewhere, and it might be a small mistake or a big mistake,
Right.
but you won't know until it's too late.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So if you had to give advice
Hmm.
to a 10-year-old on the spectrum, somewhere on the spectrum, wherever it is, what is it? What is the best way for you to be able to communicate to that person?
Um, the best advice I would give is basically believe in yourself. Know who you are and don't worry too much about what other people are ridiculing you about. Like, if you're 10 years old, your life's just beginning. You're still trying to figure out the world around you. So, don't worry too much. Take your time. Figure out who you are and what you want out of life. Because my dad always said, find what you love doing and learn to make a living with it. That's basically the key to happiness, because a lot of people would just work like a 9 to 5 shift to basically get the bills paid, put bread on the table, and that's pretty much it. And after all I've been exposed to, I can't help but think, what kind of life is that? How's that living? Considering everything that's going around and whatnot. Like, I've been to some concerts, I've been to some events, I've traveled around cross country a few times. So there's just so much in the world to there's too much in the world to be stuck on just like one thing. So take your time, learn about yourself, and believe in yourself, because no one can know you better than you.
Everywhere you go, you show up.
Exactly.
So you mentioned concerts. Can you go to concerts now and not get overwhelmed, or is there a
Um,
limit that you get, or do you have to kind of stay back a little bit or to the back edges?
There's actually been a few times I've been at concerts for bands I really like. I basically what I just do is just make sure I have enough space between me and the other people around me. Which was an interesting experience when I was at the first time at a metal concert, and I actually made a video about this, where it was a closed, tight-in area, and it was the kind of concert where everybody was standing up, not sitting down. So I definitely did not feel comfortable about that, but a friend I was with, Billy, found the upper balcony. I was like, okay, let's go up there. So so that way we're not being squeezed like a sandwich in this like ocean of people and odors and whatnot. And it was a good thing that we found the upper balcony, because while the bands were playing, I actually saw this huge group of people like constantly pushing and shoving each other. It was like a whirlpool in there. It's like, oh, jeez, are they actually fighting in there? And the person next to me was like, oh, no, that's just typical for a mosh pit.
Right. Okay. I mean, the part that I'm asking is, you recognize that you do have some things that make you extremely uncomfortable, or I'll even put it that you even have some limits.
Right.
And it's not to put yourself into that. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think everybody needs to learn to recognize that's just beyond my limit. That's going to wear me out. And so therefore, if I just step back, I can still enjoy everything and I still have energy to go on after.
Well, while it is important to acknowledge those limits, it's equally as important to not let those limits hold you back. Because if you're constantly setting lines like, okay, this is as far as I can go, and you never try to move past it, you're not really going to get anywhere. So know where your limits are. Know where, like, okay, I feel comfortable with this, but I don't feel comfortable with that. But at the same time, don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to push the boundaries, because sometimes you may find it wasn't as bad as you think. Maybe things go well, maybe things won't go well, but you won't really know until you get out of your box or get out of your comfort zone.
Okay, no, that's an excellent point. To how do we keep growing all the time?
Well, exactly. It's like part of life and part of growing. It's like maybe you won't be able to do something now, but that doesn't mean you'll never be able to do it. Maybe you just need some time to grow, or maybe you just need to work up the confidence to push that boundary. So maybe you just need some time, maybe you just need some confidence, but never settle for just certain limits. Try to push those limits whenever you can, because that's the only way you're going to grow.
Yeah, okay. Do you have any books you would recommend to people?
Actually, yes.
Besides your own.
Well, I mean, I can't help but promote.
That's right. You got to
I mean,
promote
just
your own.
buy my books. They're on Amazon. I think the most crucial book that really set me on the path of trying to make my own project or make a name for myself is something I read in high school called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And basically, this story is about Santiago, I believe he was a shepherd, who was going about his usual day and finds this person who talks about not only a treasure, but a couple other things as well, like the world's biggest lie, and that is like talking about destiny, that at some point we lose control about what happens over our lives, and all of a sudden some otherworldly force just dictates what's set in front of us. And that's what the old man described as the world's biggest lie. And he also points out when people pursue their own personal legends, when they start to make a name for themselves, the world conspires to help them. And like usually, this is a high school assignment, so like normally I would just read through these books and pick up certain lines, maybe highlight a few things here and there, and just regurgitate the information on like a quiz, which is basically what we had to do. Like, just like remember certain quotes, and well, here's the question, and here's this quote right there. A plus, that's it. But when I read The Alchemist, I began to be intrigued. Like I started to be pulled into the story, kind of like when Dad and I used to read stories. So I really took what was going on in that story to heart. So if you're thinking about like trying to figure out who you are or trying to figure out your own path, I would definitely recommend The Alchemist. You could probably find it at any bookstore, maybe Walmart or Amazon, but if you get a chance, please read it. I guarantee it's a great read, and it will have a huge impact on how you view life and your part in it.
No, that's awesome. Because it's always, I always come back to, there's so much wisdom in books. Somebody sat down and put it out. Not always do you always have to agree with everything that you read.
Right.
But it's like, it'll start getting you thinking. And like you talked about, the universe kind of speaks to what we seek. And the more we seek, the more we find, the more we find, the more we seek.
Exactly.
And it's like, wow, that's pretty cool.
It's kind of like a never-ending pursuit in a sense.
Yeah, never ending, and it never ends. And then that's the greatest part.
Yep.
Yeah. So do you have, how would you say, friendships, developing close friendships?
It was very interesting in terms of like developing close friends, because like back when I was in like elementary and middle school, every time I graduated from those schools, the family would have to move somewhere for one reason to another. So like during high school, while I made some good friends, I didn't know if I was going to be able to hold on to them. Like it felt like I was like cursed in a way. Like yeah, I may have friends for like a certain amount of years in school, but after that, that's it. But in high school, some of my friends like Billy and Sean and a couple others were friends I actually got to hold on to beyond high school. Like we even went to college together. So that was the first time I actually got to hold on to a friend, and those friends are still near and dear to me to this day. We still chat online, even though they're in Maryland, I'm in Colorado. And speaking of which, moving to a new state and trying to make new friends can be a lot more difficult when you're an adult, whereas you're a kid, as I'm just figuring out. Because like when you move to another place as a kid, you still have the luxury of going to school and making new friends there. But when you're an adult and you move to a new place and you start from scratch, you don't really have that luxury. Like, yeah, you go to work, talk to some coworkers, but can you really call them your friends? Are they the kind of people that you would want to hang out outside of work? That
Right.
I can't really determine right now. That's where I'm kind of having the biggest problem right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so, but what I come back to is, and I like the way you phrase that. Middle school, high school, we're kind of, you have friends that are manufactured for you because you got to go to school and you got to be
Pretty
there.
much. It's like in the
But
environment where you have to be with other people
People.
anyway, so.
Right. But as an adult, but that's where I come back to is finding the hobbies, the things that you enjoy, and especially with today's world of meetup groups and different things, you can automatically go to a group if it's photography. You know, those people are all into photography.
Yep.
And then it's like, oh, well, there's already a natural connection that you can be associated with.
To a
An extent, right? It's
Yeah.
not, but it's not easy.
Well, not only that, but there are some downsides to that as well. I mean, yes, it's good to have some like online friends, people to talk to online, but I don't think that should replace actual interactions with other people because, as I mentioned, interacting with other people helps you improve yourself. But if you're just typing and
Yeah.
texting a message, then what are you learning from that? What I mean, maybe you could read a message, but maybe you're not reading the emotions of the sender, or maybe not the body language. How do you know
Right.
if
What they're saying.
is true or not, or what they really mean? You're not really going to get that through a text. So, and the other thing is on the internet, on the upside, you could be anybody. On the downside, on the internet, you can be anybody. So,
Yes.
like, let's say you're.
That's where I was really more referring to is like meetup groups or different things is where you might meet them online, but you physically meet in a location that has like photography. I've done some stuff on, computer programming. I got into that meetup group and these people were talking on a level I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't stick with that group for very long, but I got to be able to, and I just got exposed to all kinds of people. How long have you been here in Colorado?
I've been here in Colorado ever since March, so that's
Okay,
like
so it's really not that long per se.
so around 8 months. Good, I
Right.
can still count.
Yeah, 8 months. Yeah, that's not. I mean, you're still just getting your feet wet of
Yeah.
knowing who is out here and who's that. Because that's. I mean, I come back to is, and again, not just somebody on the spectrum. I mean, that's something that's difficult as people get older. Where do you find friends? How do you find people that you really can connect to?
Yeah,
Not
that,
just in a work environment or just a project based. It's that you can do life together because doing life with people is what it's really about.
yeah, and life really shouldn't revolve around work. Like, yes, I work at the Home Depot as cashier, and I like that job. But I'm not going to revolve my entire life around that because, again, life is too short, and having too many things in the world to just stick to one thing.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Well, is there anything, as we kind of come to a close here, is there anything else that you would like to impart of somebody that's on the spectrum but is making it your way through life? And I applaud you for that.
Um, well, for those that are still in school and those that are still in college, there's a certain online series that I watch, Ruby, RWBY, created by the late and great Monty Ohm. And there was this certain quote that I remember from a certain character, and let's see if I can remember it. So, the thing goes like this. Just remember that you still have a long way to go. And don't think for a second that graduating means you're done. A day out here is worth a week in class. You're going to go far, but only if you never stop learning, if you never stop moving forward. Now, I probably made a couple words wrong here and there, but I think I got the gist of it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That is excellent. So I just appreciate you taking the time to come in and share with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here.
All right, thanks.